All right, welcome to Quad Standard Labs, boys and girls, people of all ages. We have two Cinelifters on the bench today. Don't mind our junk and stuff around the edge. Sorry, I tried to clear this thing off, but still got a little bit of stuff on the desk. Today, I want to talk about a understanding, at least from our perspective, Quad Standard Labs, and our reasoning and the offering recently of two different forms of Cinelifters. Yes, again, these are two different frames. We've got a Sicario right here, and we've got a thick. It may be hard to kind of see right now, but that's what we have here. But what we're going to really be talking about here is X4 or 4 motors versus 8 motors in an X8. And our reasoning at Quad Standard Labs to start offering an X4, why we maybe hadn't in the past quite yet, and really more about a discussion about kind of development within the Cinelifter community and how we need to start opening our perspective a little bit and really diving back into the history and kind of just the standard kind of best practices and what's already known about multi-rotors from all of the development that's happened well before FPV and Cinelifters really became something mainstream. So that being said, let me get a sip of my coffee. The differences between these two machines, aside from frame, are very little. The only difference really between the two, aside from frame, are going to be in the actual physical motors, are going to be the choice to go 4 motors or 8 motors. And to really think about this and start talking about the reasoning behind this, we need to kind of take a step back and understand that the community that we're in now and the Cinelifter kind of development cycles that we're in right now with whoever's doing whatever they're doing is very fragmented and is kind of all over the place as far as what people think, what people have proven, and what's just a known kind of set of data or kind of known facts about multi-rotors, designs, efficiencies, why you choose certain things over others. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that X8s are one of the worst efficiency designs that you could choose. It's stacking the motors coaxially, which means that the motors are spinning opposite, which means they're creating turbulence for each other. And the real only reason to choose X8 over any other hex or octocopter would be specifically if you're looking for performance gains in maybe high speed, or if you're looking for smaller footprints, which is also about the performance a lot of the times and about that higher speed or footprint. The reason why you don't see X8s a lot anymore in the commercial side of heavy lift, which is to me, where we look to see what's really effective and efficient, is because it's just not the most ideal situation. So a lot of platforms that used to be X8s have been converted in the heavy lift world to octos and hexes. This gives you the redundancy, it gives you the stability of the extra motors and all of that, and the efficiency of not stacking the motors. And, Cinelifting kind of started here with Andy Shin and the original heavy design, which was a hex. Now, the reason why X8s kind of took hold was the hex was not heavy duty enough and didn't perform well enough to handle bigger cameras. It also was quite a beast in tuning and some other things. And it started to approach larger than what I think was wanted in footprint for some of the folks that really need to keep these things as small as possible for a multitude of reasons, whether it be to mitigate risk and make it seem like it's less of a threat, or for a lot of folks, which is travel, compact, putting it on a backpack or hiking up a mountain, carrying a couple of these together. There are lots of reasons to keep the footprint of this thing smaller. Also, as we obviously increase size of props and slow motors down and make them bigger and put more voltage to them, it becomes more difficult to manage the platform itself and again, larger footprint, more intimidating, louder to a point with the deeper volume of the deeper tone of the props and the motors typically spinning, makes for different feelings around sets. So lots of reasons why X8 makes sense for cinelifting. But there is a huge inherent issue, and it's kind of the elephant in the room that everybody kind of talks about but doesn't, and that's flight time. One of the biggest questions we get at Quad Standard Labs is, how do I get more flight time out of this X8, or whatever the Cinelifter is? How do I get more flight time? And it's understandable. Everybody wants more flight time because the more time you're in the air, the more likely you are to get the shot, and the easier it is for workflow and for getting the shot. It's totally understandable. The unfortunate part is this: we're limited in platforms with what their efficiencies can be and where we can load them to and where we can continue to get power from. And again, the efficiency of the total package comes down to a balance between the machine and what it's capable of, the battery size coupled with the payload weight, all of those weights together making the all-up weight an efficient and effective platform. And the problem in today's cinelifting world is everybody wants to put more stuff on their camera, so the camera's going to weigh more. They want more battery life, so they want to put a bigger battery on it. And those things just don't work for X8s because we're getting to an overloaded point and we're making it even more inefficient. But it gets the job done. So that's what we're doing in a lot of situations. So if we know that we're conversely we're making some choices and we're allowing ourselves to be less effective in certain areas to be more effective in others, well, then we should always consider all options, right? So the big plus about the X8 is if a motor, a prop, or something happens, aside from just catching a ball of fire internally, if you lose a prop or a motor for some reason and the other ones are all working, you're going to make it home. Hopefully, you should. You should at least be able to land it pretty, very quickly and get it down. We've flown these things with mauled props on an entire arm where one prop was missing and the bottom prop was half gone, and we were still able to fly these things. So that is probably the number one pro for an X8. You're going to be able to get the camera home as long as nothing really crazy detrimental happens, or you don't lose an entire arm of motors or something, again, a fireball. On an X4, you're not going to make it home. You're going down if something happens. And if something happens is kind of a wide range of thing, right? Yes, props flying off, props destroyed, something like that, again, kind of happens for whatever reason that might be out of your control to various degrees. This thing's coming down. It's coming down immediately. And then we have the other part. The other part is both of these machines are typically around the edge of what performance out of the parts and components can do. Especially, again, when we start talking about, we set kind of a guideline for, hey, you should really fly these things with these payloads and these weights. And 9 times out of 10, clients come back and they, hey, I want to put a little bit more. Can it take it? Can we do this? Yes, it can. We've tested these things well above the limits that we typically tell people about. But we don't recommend it. And we don't recommend it especially long-term, correct? Because if you're stressing components long-term, even on an X8, it's not going to end up good down the road. You're going to end up with something failing down the road. If you have an X4, well, X4s are really interesting in they can carry the payload. So this X4 right here, 1,500 grams, I've flown it. This guy right here, if it were a 2808 standard build, 1,500 grams, it can fly it. Both will fly them pretty darn well. And honestly, in flight, if you don't know one's an X4 and one's an X8, so you don't have that, oh my gosh, should I push this that hard because it's only got 4 motors? If you don't have that in your brain and you were just flying these two machines and you've never flown either kind of, you don't have a lot of experience on either one, you just kind of blind test like flew them, you'd be hard pressed to tell me which was which, I bet. Um, Now, if we started talking about how long you were able to fly them, you might be able to tell. And there is two areas that I find that I feel like an X4 is slightly more limited than the X8, or kind of I can tell a performance difference. And that's going to be two things. One, in prop wash and really heavy movement. So if you're going and you're just ripping around a corner, the X8s I have found handle that prop wash when they're tuned properly much, much better. You can almost eliminate prop wash out of the really high speed, 180-degree hairpin turn at speed out of an X8 if it's tuned properly. If you're running an X4, and I've done the same kind of movements, I'm noticing more prop wash. And after talking to a couple of people about this and some tuners, I believe that it makes sense as to why. With 8 motors, we're spinning, again, a lot of air is moving around. And so when we go around that corner and we flick it and then throw it back the other way, 8 motors are spinning up and rocketing it back the other way. So we have a lot of torque and a lot of power that's taking that movement and translating it. When you have only 4 motors and you do the same thing with pretty much the same amount of weight, as it comes around that corner, I feel like the momentum is pulling against the motors, and I don't think that the motors can support the power needed to really pull through the corner as much. So there is that, which is the prop wash seems to come out a little bit more in those high speed movements on the X4. The other thing is on an X4 versus the X8, as far as what the X8 I feel like can also do better, is that initial just acceleration burst. So that first part of the acceleration and the speed burst on a high throttle throw, you're going to definitely get more speed out of X8s. Now it's coming at what is the biggest detriment, which is the big thing that everybody I think really takes away from X4 to X8, which was kind of what I wanted to bring to the table. Was there is a really big advantage to X4s if we can get away from, or if we can deal with and understand all of the things we already spoke about. So if we already know that, look, redundancy, so, safety, so to speak, as far as, the payload is going to be 50, is gone. There's no redundancy. So you're there. If the other thing is that that you're not going to be able to get those really super high performance, movements and still kind of really stick them really nicely. If that's not what you're wanting, X4 may be the way to go. And the reason is the efficiency factor. Carrying the exact same payloads, these two machines are very different in how much flight time they can get. Now, that's also relative to the X4 carrying the same battery as the X8, which is not a fair fight, right? I mean, that's where the decision is. Again, we're going to get almost 40%, 50% more flight time out of the X4. We're doing it with more capacity to necessary voltage needed, or necessary bat power needed to power the whole platform, being it's half the motors. But so we would expect obviously some higher flight times, right? But at that same rate, we could also reduce the battery size of the X4 and still get a little more flight time than we would with a heavier battery here. But again, that's all relative to the fact that this is twice the aircraft, right? I mean, it's 2 times the motor. So the efficiency of the X4 through the roof, as far as, especially when you're cruising and doing those just normal, about 70 to 80% of what most people with Cinelifters want to do, the X4 can perform. With that, couple of things to note about our X4 builds. Our X4 thick light right now, which is the only X4 we're offering in the Cinelifter category that's open propped, we're building them to be able to fly 7-inch or 8-inch props. And that's going to be, again, a big versatility thing. You can change it to the 8-inch props and probably get away with, 13 to 1,500 grams in payload, somewhere in that window. But on 7-inch props, this thing is really meant to fly 1,000 grams to 1,300 grams, kind of at most. Now, on the X8, we can fly 1,600 grams on 7 inches and do it pretty well, much better than we could ever flying 1,600 grams on this. So again, we have some differences here in performance once we start kind of mixing, or not mixing, setting each platform up the way that it's best set up. So X8s, 7 inches will outperform the payload weight that you could ever do with an X4, but put some, 8-inch props on your X4, and now we're getting to the area of an X8 with 7 inches, and so on. Now, this X8 happens to be a 2812 8x4.5 build, and so this could really pretty much outperform this X4 all day, every day. They're just not the same motor combo, and they're not the same prop combo. But, again, we were talking here more about the relativity of X8 versus X4. So that's my little chat. I probably went longer than I really wanted to. And I want to just, finish this up by saying none of this is any kind of expert, data-driven experience. All of those things are actually together, and I'm just giving you my thoughts on what I kind of know and what we've seen from what we've flown and how we've flown them. I fly every drone that we put out the door goes through me, and I take these things and I push them to their limits and then above and beyond before we ship them to verify that these are going to perform just as we say they will. And even if you, kind of want to overdo it, so to speak, they should also. So fly safe, fly smart. I hope that this discussion really continues in the community, and more so just, more and more people start getting involved in this, start getting some data. Let's start, correlating these numbers and making this stuff make more sense together instead of kind of apart, kind of deciding what is best. And let's, again, look to UAS development to this date, and we have a lot of track record as to what works, what doesn't work, and what we're doing is not much different. It's all the same, it's all the same theoreticals and science. It's just we're trying to mold it into a way that works best for our application, and that's just where all the fun is. So thanks for everybody that participates and contributes to this stuff. Fly safe, fly smart. Just fly. Peace.